definition of attention regulation. The momentarily available, deliberate, conscious, effortful capacity for altering one's own focus, especially to bring it into line with standards that support the pursuit of goals. So here are goals for the first time. In general, it is the ability to focus on the things that matter and block all the other information that is irrelevant. Okay, and it is very important to adaptive functioning. And for us here is if you can control your attention, you can restrict that one response. And what we mean by that is break those bad habits, that automatic response that you may have. And by doing that, by you controlling your attention, you can have more options. You have a lot of alternatives. So as I said before, we're going to talk about attention regulation in terms of cognitive control perspectives and executive functions. And before I move any further, I want to say that I'm going to use these two terms, strength, control, strength, and attention regulation interchangeably tonight because this is an educational piece and I wanted to make it simpler. All right. Did you know that you can run out of attention regulation? Well, this is a fact, right? We do know that it's not an unlimited ability. We know that it is a muscle that can get tired. And also that if you have multiple purposes and you have to focus on a lot of them, especially if the time interval is really short, one will inhibit the other. And of course, we have individual and situational differences, but attention control can be depleted. Who cares? Well, we care because when we take that and we put it into sport, that affects upcoming performance. Before I move any further, I want to talk about something that doesn't have to do with cognitive control. It has been proven that if your glucose levels are low, that can really affect your attention control. And actually, I was talking with a professional hockey player, a goalie, last week about things like that. He can focus a lot during the game. And one of the very first things I told him and I asked him, it was about if he has like a bottle of water with some carbs next to him and he can have like some kind of sip protocol and sip on it. So if you're having issues like that, think about it. Maybe it's a glucose level thing, right? Now, when we cannot control our attention, this is problematic because it has been linked to problematic behaviors in sport. And you see some examples, aggression and overeating, but also emotional issues, right? Failures of task performance or lack of persistence. So a big question here is, how does self-control strength functions from a cognitive control perspective? And even a better question is, what can we do? What are the mediators? What mediates between attention control and sport performance? Because if we knew those mediators and we could affect them, then we could affect our relationship. All right, so this is what we're going to talk about right now. So you see those, there are arrows, I don't know if you can see them, but we know that the more strength you have to control your attention, the better your performance. And we have found 3 moderators, right? So if we can affect those moderators, we can affect this relationship. So now we're going to talk about task motivation, task monitoring, and operating processes. Let's start with the first one. First question, are you willing to work hard, especially on a difficult task? Because we have seen a problematic tendency here. If you have low levels of motivation, that will lead to no recruitment of the prefrontal cortex. And side note, we're going to talk a little bit tonight about sports neuroscience, just a little bit, right? Not too much, but we need to. So low levels of motivation can lead to suboptimal performance. So if you're not motivated enough, that will affect your attention, which will affect your performance. Okay. Now, working hard on one task will affect the motivation levels on the next task. So again, here we can see depletion through motivation. So motivation is huge in the relationship between attention and performance. Think about that and think about your everyday life. Task monitoring. Are you willing to recognize potential or actual mistakes? Some people are not. But we do know here there's another tendency. It's called error proneness. So if you don't have that error proneness, you have low levels of autonomous functioning, which is problematic. So again, I'm going to touch a little bit. I'm going to talk about sports neuroscience, but not too much. There's a thing called ERN, error related negatively, which is a brain signal that we can detect with EEG. And that fires, we can detect it when we do an error that has to do with behavior. So if we have weaker ERN, we'll have a weaker error monitoring process. And that's important because that is linked to lower control of emotional reaction to stressors and also to lower performance. So what we're trying to say here is the more motivated we are, the greater the task monitoring, which equals to the more personally invested we are, the more we monitor for potential errors. If we monitor for potential errors, that is really good because we can that can lead to high levels of autonomous functioning. So here, although that can be depleted too, we can see that motivation plays a huge role in task monitoring, and that's how that's something else that affects the relationship between attention and performance. And the last thing that we have noticed is, again, not too much about neuroscience, that we have ACC, which is a problem monitor, and that actually gives the order to DLPFC, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, to actually solve the problem. So we've seen here that from this perspective, that this is valuable from an individual difference perspective. What do I mean? For example, we know that after an error feedback that can happen, let's say from the coach or from a teammate, men slow down less than women. Okay, and that's maybe something important for the coaches to think about. So we have these three things that affect the relationship between attention and effortful performance. Let's talk about executive functions a little bit and see how this relates to attention. When we talk about executive function, let's break down the two words. Executive can be somebody who's giving an order, and then we have the executor who's actually making it happen. In our case, it can be a coach who gives the order, or it can be ourselves. So executive function can happen. We can give the order to actually do whatever we need to do. And function is a complex activity that has to do with a goal we have. The outcome is always the same, but there are many ways to achieve it. So we say we have a lot of degrees of freedom. And that's what executive function is. For tonight, we're going to talk about it in terms of problem solving. And we'll see how attention affects problem solving, right? And we're going to talk about problem solving in terms of 4 phases: representation, planning, execution, and evaluation. All right. So the very first phase is problem representation. And then after that, we can just skip it. We could move to number 2, which is planning. And then number 3, which is execution, and has 2 subphases: intending and the rule use. And then number 4, which is the last one, and has also 2 subphases: error detection and error correction. Let's break them down one by one. So when you have a problem, the very first thing you have to do is create that problem space, which means pretty much it's something subjective, and it has to do with how you perceive the problem and what possible solutions you may see, right? Now, in order to do that, let's see how attention is important. The problem must be represented in a way favorable to solving it. And that's linked to selective attention, and more specifically to something called filtering. which is pretty much to filter what to attend and what to not attend. Also, it depends on something else that's called flexibility of attention, and more specifically, priming, which is another ability to switch between thinking about two different concepts or think about multiple concepts at the same time. So you can see how attention affects the first phase of problem solving. Let's go to the second phase. Second phase is called planning. So we have created that space, that problem space, and now we have to pick which solution is this solution. So then we create a plan, and then we have to sequence the actions one by one. Here now in execution, attention plays a huge role as well. There are two subphases: intention, which has to do with remember to do something or sustaining that attention over time, and then actually doing it. That's the rule use. So when we talk about intention, attention is very important to activate that plan. So you see that it's necessary for that goal direct, attention is necessary to, and it affects performance. The second part is just that the rule use and happens after intention. What we need to remember now is that if you have the intention to do something, it doesn't mean you're actually going to do it, one. And two, that you'll do it when you think the right time is there, okay? And the fourth thing about attention and problem solving is evaluation, phase 4. Two more sub-phases here, the error detection and the error correction. The error detection can come from a third person, such as a coach, or from ourselves, which is our own perspective. And our own perspective is about discrepancies between what I was intending to do and see in the actual outcome. Here, we're more interested in that subjective error detection, okay? Error correction has to do with taking that and going back to the phases and fixing it, actually fixing it. One thing that we should be cautious about here is we should not pick the same solution for a similar problem before we check that it is appropriate for this specific new situation. So some practical implication, because I went through a lot of theory, is that you should try to increase your task motivation. Don't forget though, as a coach, for example, that people are motivated to preserve some resources for possible future use. So have that in mind. Try to increase your task monitoring. Try to find potential errors, okay? Consume glucose. That can be really important if you have some issues with attention. Make sure you know the specifics of yourself or your players or of the game or the drill, whatever is going on. Apply selective attention. That will help you represent the problem best. Employ attention to keep the plan activated. And also, again, attention is helpful to promote inhibition. And by inhibition, we're talking about challenging some habits you may have so you can see alternatives. These are the take-home points for attention regulation. Jordan Ailes, would you like to help me if you're there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you read them for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Attention regulation is the ability to focus on what is relevant while minimizing the intrusion of irrelevant information. Attention regulation is crucial in terms of willpower and optimal functioning and performance. Attention regulation is linked to task motivation. The depletion of one's ability to control attention in sport is problematic to upcoming performance. Attention is linked to executive function. Problem solving spans 4 phases: representation, planning, execution, and evaluation. When the aspects of execution function are integrated temporarily and functionally through problem solving, attention is an integral part of at least representation, execution, and evaluation.
Thank you.